Well, today we are honored to have with us William Perry Pendley. He's the President and Chief Legal Officer of the Mountain States Legal Foundation and former Marine Corps captain. He also served in the Reagan administration as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Energy and Minerals at the Department of Interior and the author of this book, Sagebrush Rebel. You got to get a copy of this. Reagan's Battle with Environmental Extremists and Why It Matters Today. William, nice to have you. Where are you, my friend? Where are we Skyping you in from?
You're taping me in from my home in Evergreen, Colorado. Thank you.
Nice to have you with us today. Fascinating book, fascinating argument, and now you were also really instrumental in some of the policies during the Reagan administration as it relates to energy and minerals, right?
Absolutely. I had the privilege of helping to change the way we do the Outer Continental Shelf oil and gas leasing program. We went from a program that operated as a monopolist in which a handful of tracts were made available to a program that made the entire Outer Continental Shelf available wherever industry thought there might be an opportunity to develop energy. And as a result, oil and gas development in the Outer Continental Shelf, especially in the Gulf of Mexico, took off. And I'm proud to have been a part of that. I had the backing of the Secretary and certainly the backing of the President of the United States. And the program we put in place back in the 80s is still in place today, except for the fact that President Obama has closed almost every area in the Outer Continental Shelf. He's left a few areas open. Reagan had the entire Outer Continental Shelf open, so that was a big change.
All right, so how would you describe the former president's battle with extreme environmentalists?
I think it's the beginning of what we know today as the big battle, that the environmental movement is now an arm of the Democratic Party. It does things not because it's concerned about the environment, but because it wants Democrat policies in place. Furthermore, it is not a hopeful or an optimistic way of thinking. They are pessimists, they are neo-Malthusians, and Reagan saw all of that. Reagan called them environmental extremists. He also called them modern-day Luddites. And that all began back in the 80s. Environmentalists had their way in the 60s and the 70s, and Reagan came in and said, well, we're not going to do what you want to do anymore. We're going to put people into the environmental equation. And environmentalists, of course, they say, oh, people are part of the problem. People are at war with the planet, and people don't have any hope for the future. We just need to use less and hope we survive. And Reagan was not about that. Reagan was optimistic. And so the battles that Reagan took on back in 1981 through 88 are the battles we're still facing today.
All right. Now, he obviously, his policies protected the environment. I guess you could almost say he was a conservationist, wouldn't you say that?
Absolutely conservationist. That's the term that Reagan knew. That's the term that Teddy Roosevelt used.
Right.
And the battle back in the old days, back in the day, as we say, was between conservationists who said we want to conserve, which means wise use, and the preservationists who say we want to keep it unchanged and just to look at and enjoy. But at the center of both philosophies was human beings. With the conservationists, it was the human need for fiber and food and water. And with regard to the preservationists, the human need for spiritual enrichment, an opportunity to get close to nature and thus close to God. But that all changed in the 60s and the 70s. It became, the environmentalists said, oh, it's not what man needs. It's all about the planet's need, or Mother Earth, or Gaia,
right,
or those kinds of things. And but Reagan was a true environmentalist. He loved the outdoors. He felt close to God when he was in the outdoors. And he said he made more wilderness areas than any president in history. He restored the national parks. He brought them up to code. He brought more lands into the Park Service and into the wildlife refuge system than any president. So he was a great conservationist, great protector of our public lands. But the environmentalists couldn't admit that, because if he was right about that, well, gosh, maybe he was right about oil and gas and mining and all those good things.
All right, so obviously his policies, which you had a great part of formulating, created the template that we can use today to kickstart this thing again. I mean, I know we got an extreme president right now that's trying to unwind everything. In fact, right here in Oregon, as you probably know, William, we're fighting this like crazy, as you can imagine, in the forest, and we're watching our forest burn up, and then we can't get in there and clean it up. I mean, you know the battle, you know the argument, but the President Reagan's policy is a template that we can go back to, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I set it out in my book, Sagebrush Rebel, chapter by chapter: onshore oil and gas, offshore oil and gas, coal, strategic minerals, all the issues. And at the end of every chapter, after talking about what Reagan believed and what Reagan did, and he always did what he believed, which is unique, I think, among politicians. At the end of every chapter, I say, okay, that was then. What's going on now, and what do we need to do about it? And I think there's a great hope. I mean, this revival of our natural gas production in this country, which is taking place only on state and private lands, not on federal, would have been fully anticipated by Reagan, because he said the oil industry is not a monopoly. It's the small independent producers that find and discover stuff, and they do it with unconventional techniques. And this hydraulic fracturing that we're using to great effect is a demonstration of Reagan's great confidence in human beings and our ability to overcome adversity and create jobs and opportunity. And the great tragedy of Obama, in my view, is that the minority community loves Obama, but he's really killing them with regard to his economic policies, with his unemployment rate. And of course, the gas revival is one example of how Reagan policies can bring economic recovery.
Do you think that just gas prices alone are going to force us to reconsider our own capabilities of being self-sustaining when it comes to energy?
I think that not necessarily gas prices, but certainly the jobs. There's a man by the name of Harold Hamm. He's the guy primarily responsible for the Bakken Miracle in North Dakota. He's a multimillionaire as a realist, started out of poverty, frankly. And he happened to meet with President Obama, and he said, Mr. President, I want you to know about the amazing technological transformation in the oil and gas industry and what a marvelous job it's doing. And Obama just brushed him aside, and he said, oh, I have Secretary Chu here, who says in 5 years we'll have batteries and we won't need oil and gas anymore. And Hamm came out of that meeting and he said, even if you believe that nonsense, why would you want to do away with the economic benefit that oil and gas activity is producing? A great example of that is in Pennsylvania. You look at northern Pennsylvania, and it's an economy booming because of natural gas production. Just across the state line in New York, people are in poverty. They are losing their homes because the governor will not allow development. I used to think that the worst thing Yoko Ono ever did was kill the Beatles. And now I think the worst thing she's ever done is condemn the people of upstate New York to poverty because of her radical views on natural gas development.
You know, President Reagan kind of jumped away from this term called bipartisan or bipartisan consensus as it relates to, well, several things, but in particular the Outer Continental Shelf. If he had not done that, probably that program never would have gotten off the ground. I mean, he just went out and become a pioneer and did it.
Oh, he absolutely did, and against the greatest attack on a president for a major policy that you've ever seen. The Democrats in Congress went nuts, the environmentalists went nuts, the mainstream media, what we would call today the mainstream media, was absolutely apoplectic about it. But nobody's changed it since, because frankly, it works. Jimmy Carter essentially made available about this much Outer Continental Shelf lands. Reagan released this much. When you look at the chart in my book, it's just possibly mind-boggling what Reagan did, and it drove the industry into the deep, deep water in the Gulf of Mexico. And the miracle, the miraculous discoveries we've seen in the Outer Continental Shelf since Reagan's day is traceable directly to one decision, the decision by Reagan to release the entire Outer Continental Shelf to a search for energy.
It appears to me your book is really the resource that is needed now to go back to this argument. Look at, we've had other people kind of get in and out of this, as you know. other governors, governor from Alaska and others have gone down this road a little bit. But if there is a turnover in Congress, if we do get a conservative Congress or president again, your book becomes the textbook by what can be done.
It absolutely is the textbook because, as one commentator on Amazon.com commented about my book, he said it's both anecdotal and analytical. And on the analytical part, I tell stories, interesting stories. It's not inside baseball stuff. Don't worry about, oh, you're going to get into the weeds. Perry's going to get into the weeds on this. Absolutely not. It's interesting tales, but I back it up analytically. I got 1,234 footnotes spread over 193 pages to give that sort of ammunition that you talk about to congressional leaders, governors, and public policy think tanks to say, hey, here it is. This is what we ought to be doing right now. And if the Republicans take the Senate and have their wits about them next year, then maybe we can have some of this stuff going forward with override margins.
What was the President Reagan's view on water usage? You know, that's quite an argument between Indians and farmers and power companies and forestry people. You know the drill there. What was his position on water?
Well, he was coming from, of course, he's from Illinois, grew up, spent his young adulthood in Iowa as a radio broadcaster, and then, of course, a Californian. So he's well aware of the water issue, but he was committed to property rights. That's the key aspect you can say about Reagan. And at the same time, not just property rights for non-Indians, but property rights for American Indians. Reagan, as governor, vetoed a dam that was proposed. The entire state bureaucracy supported the dam. Yeah, let's build the dam. And Reagan was informed that it would violate a treaty with American Indians. And he said, we've broken enough treaties. We're not going to break this treaty. So I think it'd come down to property rights. Who had, under the prior appropriation doctrine, under the beneficial use doctrine, who has control? And one of the things that Reagan did, Jimmy Carter tried to seize control of Western waters. He had his top lawyer at the Department of Interior write an opinion that said, we're in control of Western water, and to heck with you folks out there. You used to control it, but now we're in charge. Yeah. And the first thing that Reagan's Interior Secretary Jim Watt did was his solicitor, his top lawyer, wrote an opinion reversing that. And you know, when I talk about this, the sagebrush rebel, and when you talk about water, you're talking sagebrush rebel stuff, and it's going on today.
Right.
It's not a partisan issue. Democratic governors like Babbitt of Arizona, Lamb of Colorado, Matheson of Utah, Hirschler of Wyoming, all Democrats hated the Andrus Carter policies on the West.
Wow.
And it's
we're
seeing that sagebrush rebellion today, Bob.
Hey, I want to get you back. Fascinating. Thank you for your work. And again, the book is entitled Sagebrush Rebel. Check it out. William Perry Pendley. There's a picture there. And let me encourage you to get you back. Fascinating discussion. It's the heart of a lot of things that we're doing here in Oregon. God bless you, my friend.
So much. Thank you so much. Great to be with you.
All right. We'll be right back.